Hello Astrobro subscribers, welcome back to another video in the layer series where we talk about the layers of perception, the way to analyze a star chart, the way to sort of separate out the different layers of the star chart and know which layer to focus on, because a star chart is a multi-dimensional, very large, complex thing, and you can choose to focus on different parts of it. And this helps you to understand which part you want to focus on at a time. So the last video we were talking about the 11th layer, which is a realm of basically creativity, and it's ruled by Mercury. It is the level of potential energy where you can create things kind of from scratch, where the 9th layer is like an engineer, which is a person who takes the existing structure and adds to it and modifies it. The 11th layer of consciousness is a level of consciousness which can create from either their words being represented by Gemini or from their from the earth, like raw materials, which is different than taking some parts that somebody else already made and putting them together in a new way, a more functional way. This is actually making the thing from scratch. So, with this being said, where do you go past this? What is a higher level? Because remember, we're going to 13. So you're going to have to sort of understand that each layer system contains more energy than the previous one. Sort of, it scales upward. And so the 12th layer is a layer which, so the 12th layer is a layer which takes that sort of unfocused but very powerful creativity of Gemini or Virgo and adds an orientation to it. It adds a focused direction. So you can imagine that each of the stable layers you could think of as like a plane, just this expanse of possibility, where you're sort of running around in this plane of possibility. Your consciousness is moving around through this plane of possibility and trying to map the territory out through doing the different things of your life and picking up different energies and whatnot. By energies, I just mean anything with a frequency, anything that waxes and wanes, that ebbs and flows. And everything in your life is like that. Everything you do, from the day and night cycle to walking to breathing, has this waxing and waning, this ebbing and flowing of things. And sort of the level that you do that at, the level that you wax and wane and ebb and flow at, the sort of waxing and waning that you pay attention to, or that you're capable of functionally using to your advantage, is something approximating the level of consciousness that you have. So every stable layer, which would be 5, 8, and 11, what we've discussed so far, is a plane of potential. The passive unstable layers are, you can imagine a line coming up. So imagine a flat plane, which is the stable layer, and then a line rising up from the middle of the plane. And that would be the first sort of manifestation of the passive unstable layer, which basically takes this plane of potential, and orients yourself in it. And it sort of gives you a purpose, a telos, inside this plane of potential. It takes the potential and it makes it more manifest. And then the active unstable layer you can think of sort of as that line coming up from the stable layer, turning into a spike and punching through to a new plane. You could think of it kind of like that. It's a crude metaphor, but it seems to work. So the key with passive unstable layers, is that they take the stable system and they give it a purpose, they give it a direction, they give it an orientation. And because of this, it constitutes a higher dimension of thought. Now, where do you go from creativity, from this sort of boundless creativity? What do you do when you can do anything? Well, there's a constant theme where being able to do anything gives rise to a contradiction, and then you have to choose one thing. So in a sense, what the 12th layer does with the 11th layer is it takes all of these potential things that you could do. It focuses down on one, and it intensifies it. So you take all of that energy that is possible, all of the things you could do, and you sort of absorb the energy from all the redundant things, and you focus on a purpose. And that purpose could really be anything, which is one of the reasons why the 12th layer is it's often represented as a very dangerous space in movies. And it's basically almost always characterized in the negative light. And it is a very negative energy. And by negative, I don't mean bad. I mean like the negative pole on a battery. The negative pole on a battery is not necessarily immoral. It's just negative. So 12th layer entities are sort of hyper fixated on one goal at a time. And they're very focused. And they're very... because they're a negative energy, they sort of pull in people around them. If you can imagine like something like a black hole sucking everything toward it without necessarily even really trying to. That's kind of what the 12th layer is like. This space of intrigue surrounds them because they're not really talking, they're just sort of, grinding out their purpose. And they're so intense that people are like, well, what's that guy? That guy seems to know where he's going, or that girl seems to know where she's going. Let me follow that person and see what they're doing. And so they sort of gain influence and intrigue just by being themselves. Now the planets associated with this are Pluto, which is obviously known for its intensity and transformation, and the moon, which, if you think about the moon is it's a planet that in its immature state is very emotional and is very sort of scattered and sort of whimsical, and maybe even focused on superficial comforts. But when the moon is fully matured, when it's fully actualized, that energy is fully controlled and understood. It's like a mother bear, right? Like a mother bear is not something that you necessarily want to go and mess around with, right? So there's this this intensity to it, this you will not stop me sort of level to it. And it's because what it's doing is basically extending off of the energy of pure creativity and focusing it in an orientation, focusing it in a direction. The colors associated with this level of consciousness are sort of dark blues, dark purples, ultraviolet light, that sort of black light. Anything that's really dark tinted. It could be even dark red, dark green, dark orange, all these colors, just the darker spectrum. It's honestly one of the best representations of the 12th layer is, and this kind of shows it in the villainous light, is when the movie The Lion King, I assume most people have seen that, so it's because it's a children's movie, it's pretty popular. But basically when they're going from the sort of solar kingdom, right, because the lion is Leo rules the sun, all that, And they're on top of the pyramid, which is a representation of the 13th layer. And Mufasa saying, everything the light touches is my kingdom, which is, Jupiter and the sun. It's tradition, it's the state, it's authority, it's religion, it's all these things. Very 13th layer, that golden glow we talked about in the tree video. And then they look to the elephant graveyard, and he's like, well, don't go there because the sun doesn't go there. And then what is in the elephant graveyard? It's like basically Scar, right? And this sort of 12th layer energy, this sort of insane fixation, and Scar views that in a very, he has that in a very villainous way. And that's the thing about the 12th layer, is that it can be used for anything. But even when they go to the elephant graveyard, what's there, right? It's all dark. There's no light. There's no sunlight. There's no warmth. It's cold, and there's this insane mastermind plotting to overthrow the king. And I don't want to sit here and say that the 12th layer can be it has to be a very negative thing, villainous. I don't think it has to be negative, but it doesn't have to be evil. That's just often how it's portrayed because of basically a misrepresentation by Christianity. It's very focused. It's very selfish, kind of, in a way. It's very focused on what it wants, creating what it wants. So in a way, there's a lot of potential for villainy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be villainous. You could be doing something for the good of other people as well. So yeah, that is the basically the 12th layer. And honestly, I would recommend that for anybody trying to understand the layer system, you go back and watch the Lion King, because the Lion King is one of these movies that it has the layer system, so it almost feels like the people who made that movie they knew what they were doing. And in a sense they did, because they're basically modeling Joseph Campbell, who modeled Jung, who modeled basically the Hermetics and the alchemists. But and that's where all this stuff basically comes from. But yeah, go back and watch The Lion King and see if you can apply the layer system to it. I recommend you try that. So anyway, that was my video on the 12th layer, and I'll be doing the 13th layer, and then we'll be moving on to the next series, which I think is either going to be Dashas, Padas. There might be a couple other things that I could try to do, but anyway, you'll find out about that when we get there. Oh, and the unit of time associated with the 12th layer, I almost forgot to mention it, is the nakshatra system. The nakshatra system is obviously connected to the moon. It's on a base 27 time scale, but we'll get into more of that later, and the frequency behind these different things. We'll get into that later. That's a whole other video. But until then, yeah, I'll be doing the 13th layer, and then we'll move on to a new series. So until then, we'll talk to you later. Have a good one.